Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. Today, we're going to be doing our 6th webinar on the Workforce Priorities series. We're talking about how to attract, hire, and retain the right people for today's behavioral health world, and today's focus is on that retain piece. My name is Naomi Weinstein, and I work at ICL, and I'm joined today by Glenn Karunas, who's going to be our lead presenter. Glenn is an independent consultant and seasoned senior HR professional who's worked in a number of healthcare organizations, as well as Edie Schwartz, who is also an independent consultant, as well as in one of her many guises, former executive director of Putnam Family Community Services, now called CoveCare, and Edie is a fierce advocate for recovery services. What we're going to do today is Glenn's going to talk. He's going to be our primary presenter, and he'll be talking for about 35-40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A, and Edie and I are available for questions as well as part of that. During the Q&A, we're going to make this kind of a much more open Q&A, so if people have questions from other webinars on HR stuff that you've attended, feel free to pose those questions as well to kind of set aside a big chunk of time. So I'm going to just turn this over officially to Glenn now.
Thanks, Naomi, and hi, everybody. How's everybody doing today on this beautiful day? My gosh, October 1st, do you believe it? 3 more months left in this very, very unique and unusual year. But thanks for joining us here today. I hope some of you have joined us for the past webinars. We've really, all 3 of us, have really enjoyed putting this together and presenting it to you. So thanks for joining us. So today we're going to talk about something really, really important, and that is employee engagement. So we've talked about a lot of these issues, and for some of you, this slide may look a little bit familiar, but we asked the question in kind of cascading fashion. Does the organization have a culture that ensures the right people, which we've talked about getting in the door, with the right skills, do the right things with the organizational culture that will support that, get the right results, stay with you, so a lot about employee retention, managing performance, and then ultimately enjoy doing their best work. So employee engagement is really about those last 2 things, having the employees want to stay with you and enjoy doing their best work. Next slide. So let's define employee engagement. It's always a good idea to define your terms so everybody understands what it is that you're trying to talk about. So employee engagement, we came up with a couple of different things. It's really the conditions that help employees do their best work. You know, I do a considerable amount of leadership training. I have a number of different modules that I teach on leadership. In addition to when I teach in my MBA students, I talk a lot about leadership. And one of the key things that leaders do, whether it's organizational leaders or supervisors, are to establish the conditions in which people can do their best work. That is a key role of leadership in my view. So to have engaged employees, it's really important that the organization and the organization's managers establish those conditions to help employees do their best work. You want employees to feel like they have a vested interest in you as an organization and are really motivated to do their best. It's really the whole point of employee engagement is about really finding and driving that discretionary effort to make sure that your people are genuinely committed to the furtherance of the organization, to getting results, and ultimately to make sure that your clients are treated well, with respect, and on the way to recovery. Next slide. So, I always like to do, some kind of a variation on head, hands, and heart. So we found this one on employee engagement. It really is, it's engaging the employee intellectually and emotionally so they're delivering, hands, their best work. All right? You want them to be a positive representative of the organization. You want to capture them, you want to capture their minds, you want to capture their hearts and have them feel that they really want to do their best work, and then translate that intellect and emotion into really feeling that genuine commitment that's going to drive a positive impact on the organization and on the organization's clients. That's really what employee engagement is all about. It's touching people, it's developing relationships, it's touching people on an intellectual and emotional level to motivate them to do their best work. Next slide. Well, you might ask, is engagement necessary? Do you really have to have employees that are committed, that are employees that are happy? I mean, frankly, employee engagement, used to be called employee satisfaction, but you can have employees that are really satisfied and happy, but not really so committed. So is engagement necessary? Well, you knew that we would ask that rhetorical question by answering in the positive. So with engagement, you have really excited people who are pushing towards goals. You have people that have genuine energy who really want to work together. With a lot of that energy, you have a tremendous amount of creativity where people will come up with new and unique ways to reach people and to give their best. People really enjoy their work, and ultimately, clients are happier. Clients feel good about the services that they're receiving. But if you don't have engagement, we all know, we've seen the organization that has poor staff morale. We've seen organizations where staff seem to be just going through the motions. We know, we've all experienced at some point in time, organizations where absenteeism and lateness are just rampant. Unfortunately, a lot of these things put into the soup, into the mix, you find poor client outcomes, and there's a failure to achieve goals. So we would submit to you that engagement really is important and necessary. And we're going to talk about some of the things this morning that you can do to help engage your employees. Next slide. Okay, one of my favorites. I have to say I'm a real devotee of the Gallup Q12. And for those that want to hear a little bit more about the Gallup Q12, there's a great book out there called First Break All the Rules. It was written in the late 90s, early 2000s by Buckingham and Kaufman. No, sorry, Fleetwood Mac fans, it's not Buckingham and Nix, but it's Buckingham and Kaufman. All right. And, their model is that, throw out all these 50, 60, 70 question employee satisfaction surveys. Really boil it down to 12 things. And if you boil it down and have positive responses to these 12 things that an organization can provide, you are going to have an engaged workforce. So let's look at it in a little bit more detail. So the first thing is resources at the bottom of the pyramid. I know what is expected of me at work. How fundamental. But if you were to ask people, I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily be able to articulate that. So you really have to be very clear about what the expectations are. And I know for me, I've had lots of circumstances where I'll walk around, I'll speak to employees, and one of the things that frustrates them no end is that they don't have the materials and equipment necessary to do their job. Either they don't have it, or it's broken, or they've been asking it to be fixed, or they've been asking for a little piece that would really help them do their work. And by the way, somebody asked if I name the book again. It's called First Break All the Rules by Buckingham and Kaufman. So, but people get very frustrated when they don't have the basics to do their work. All right, we've certainly heard about that with PPE and at the beginning of the pandemic. So really the basic needs. So just like the bottom of the pyramid, just like Maslow's hierarchy, you need to put the basics in place before you move on to some of the higher level things. So I know what's expected of me, and I have the materials, equipment. Then we get to the management support level, which is, do I have an opportunity to do what I do best every day? Has somebody given me recognition for the work I've done in the last 7 days? So we talked last week, for those of you, or 2 weeks ago, that were involved in performance management. And one of the things we've talked about with performance management is how important it is to make sure that people feel appreciated, that people are acknowledged, that people are developed. So, and it seems, according to the folks who really have studied this carefully, the Gallup folks, and the Gallup folks, by the way, is the Gallup company that are just the experts on surveys. So what they've done is they've taken and boiled it down to these elements. So what the Gallup folks say is, did I recognize somebody or have I been recognized in my work in the last 7 days for doing something well? The supervisor or someone at work cares about me. Sometimes, people look at caring at work as kind of a negative. Well, people are there to work. You're not necessarily supposed to care about them. I think that is a bunch of nonsense. I think the managers and the organization, to really get an engaged workforce, really have to demonstrate that they care about the people that are working for them. And then somebody at work encourages my development. We spent a lot of time at the last webinar talking about performance management and how important it is to work to develop your staff, to provide them with opportunities to learn and grow, to provide them with opportunities for networking or formal training. So if you, as a manager, support your staff's development, that's going to go a long way towards them being engaged. Then we got, okay, no person is an island. In every organization, there is some modicum of teamwork. So then we get to the next level, which is teamwork. At work, do my opinions seem to count? In other words, do I have real and meaningful input into what's going on? Is the mission or the purpose of this organization one that I really feel is valid and actually is lived through the organizational culture? Are my coworkers committed to quality? So in other words, are the people I work with just as committed as I am to making sure that we're providing great service here? And one that I found interesting when I first read this book, I have a best friend at work, but it really, if you really think about it, it's something that's so important. It's somebody who you look forward to seeing when you come into work, that you can feel close to, that you can feel that you can vent to, that you feel safe with, that you feel that you're going to be able to laugh with and cry with. So it's really important, just like friends are really important, outside of the workplace, friends are important at work too. I remember very vividly, there was an older employee, shall I say, who clearly was slowing down, and people around her were complaining. So a bunch of people went up to her and said, "Hey, so-and-so is slowing down, and I don't know, maybe we have terrific retirement benefits. Maybe we should convince her to retire." So somebody went up to her and said, "You know what? We have great benefits." She said, "What would I do if I wasn't working? These are all my friends here at work. This is really a great part of my life. So I don't want to leave, and I certainly want to do my best." So people having their friends at work is very important to them and very important for them to feel engaged. And then lastly, the top of the pyramid is growth. Have I really shown progress? Have I shown improvement in the last 6 months? And does this organization continue to give me opportunities to learn and grow, to develop myself, to become better? Are there places that I can go here, or are there places I can go outside of here that this organization is going to help me develop in me to make me better than I already am? So if you look at this, I love the Gallup Q12. I've been a devotee of this for a very long time. And I think if you look at these different dot points here and you focus on these, I think if you focus on trying to make these better in your organization, you too will have a really engaged workforce. Next slide. Okay, so we promised you we were going to give you some tips. So we try to break this down to fostering employee engagement at both the organizational level and at the managerial level. So organizationally, let's start there first. It's all part of the culture, which we talked about during a number of sessions. It's really important that you are creating the environment both organizationally and managerially that's going to bring out the best in your employees. So talk about those frustrations about resources. Make sure they're available. Organizations that provide opportunities for training and development. I was doing a leadership webinar yesterday for a social services organization that I work with on Long Island. And, I said to the group, your organization is terrific because they're giving you these 3 hours to learn and to how to become a better manager. You'd be surprised that there are organizations out there that really do not promote and support training and development, wellness support, making sure that your organizational culture aligns with the missions and goals. an organization that's committed to communicating regularly and being transparent about that. Salary and benefits, people are always looking at that. And it is a basic, you might consider it the basic resources to do your job. But, those that have the policies and the structure that people really want will foster greater commitment, rewards and recognition, and then to monitor those things through feedback, through surveys, through getting out and talking to people. As we said a couple of weeks ago, getting out and playing catch. That's how you catch people doing great things. So, you have to make sure that you're providing this great environment from a global level, and then, next slide, at a managerial level. So there's lots of things that you can do individually, no matter what level you're at in the organization, that's going to help foster employee engagement. We're going to spend a little bit more time on the manager level than on the organizational level, because many of you will probably have a lot more control over that than the organizational piece. Although I know we have leaders here that are looking at that as well. I know everybody is concerned about that. We're going to focus this morning, because there's so much that can be done about employee engagement. We're going to focus more on the managerial level. So what do managers do? What can managers do to foster great employee engagement? Number one, first and foremost, the base, the nirvana, establish trust. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. But if you don't have a trusting relationship with your employees, it's going to be very hard to engage them in ways that spark both their heads and their hearts to get the best from their hands. So establishing trust, to me, is really the foundation. And if you can establish trust, or to establish trust, you can build strong teams. You have to communicate on a regular basis, which we've talked about it during several of our webinars. Making sure really people are very clear about their role and about expectations for their role is also critical in fostering an environment where people are really engaged and really can give that discretionary effort. There's going to have conflict, right? If I could see your hands and ask if you raise your hand for anybody who has never had conflict in the organization, every hand would go up. So, but the key is you can't ignore that conflict. You have to get pretty skilled at managing it and making sure that you're working with people, working with groups, working with teams to manage that inevitable conflict. And, when I do a lot of my managerial webinars, especially when I do webinars and seminars on team building, I really spend a lot of time emphasizing different techniques to manage conflict and how important managing conflict really is. Developing staff, which we've talked about a lot, and that can be one-to-one, or it can be through a number of different means. And ultimately, establishing trust means building strong relationship bonds with your staff, with others in the organization. That's how things get done. And that's how you can really foster people to really give their best. So they're really taking that extra step to make sure that your clients are treated well, with respect, and get their needs met. Next
Hey,
slide.
Glenn, let me just jump in and say something, because this is
Sure.
such a wonderful and important slide. As middle managers, we often hear a lot about people feeling like they can't make an impact, that you're kind of betwixt and between. You're not the policymaker and you're not the direct care staff, and middle managers often feel, what can I do to make change? This slide is what you can do to make change. You really have in your control the ability to engage your team. And I think that is incredibly important. So in this slide that Glenn has put up really says so many things to you. And in many of the slides that Glenn has touched on in the last bunch of webinars, is that people don't leave jobs sometimes, they leave bad supervisors. And so as a middle manager and at any level, but this is within our control, and that always feels better when something's within our control.
Great, thank you. Thank you for supplementing that. And I couldn't agree with you more. There's a lot that managers can do about, as I said with the very first slide, fostering that environment where people can thrive. And there's a lot you can do about controlling your own work group and getting the best from your employees. And this is a great overview. But But we're not going to stop there. But as they say on the commercial, but wait, there's more. So we're going to tell you a little bit more about some of these things that we put in this slide. So next slide. Aha, the big T word, trust. All right. I mean, we found this this on the web, and I think this says so many things. You know, fostering trust is so critical. It's really important that you have a trusting relationship, that you create a safe environment, that you're perceived by your people to be really reliable, that you have their back, that you're committed, and that you're very skilled as well, that you really know what you're doing when it comes to whatever service you're looking to deliver. You know, you're going to help people build networks. That's that web of people who, you know, get things done. We all know that it's not necessarily, you know, the formal methods that you use to get things done, but it's those relationships, it's those networks that really will help you grease the skids, if you will, to really get things accomplished. You know, having a strong value system, being consistent, you know, not being the type that, oh, gee, I wonder what, you know, the boss is going to be like today. Being consistent, knowing, you know, where you're coming from, knowing what your values are. Listen, everybody has rough days, but, you know, you've got to be consistent. And, you know, notice I've left this for last. Being sincere. I call it being authentic. People can see from a mile away if you're not being sincere, if you're not being authentic. So, you know, you really have to be your true self. That will really help you establish trust. And what are some of the things that you can do to really establish that trust, to build those relationships? Get to know your people as people. You know, I know there's somewhat of a fine line that people want to walk when dealing with their employees. You know, how much do you really want to know about your personal life? I've always been one to believe that you have to get to know your people. And frankly, and not everybody will share. I get that. But to me, the most effective managers are those that get to know their staff, get to know them on a personal level, get to know their families, get to know how many kids they have, get to know where their kids are going to school, get to know what their motivations are, get to know what their employees' passions are, and then, you know, have that information so it's in the back of your head, asking on a regular basis, how are you doing? How's the family? You know what? I know you told me you were really passionate about this particular program. Have you been able to implement that? No, I can't because it's been a little tough because I feel I have, you know, a lot of extra work to do, or I feel that there's things that get in the way. Okay, let me see if we can brainstorm on something. Let's see if we can collaborate to come up with something that's going to be able to have you be able to do the things that you really love to do on a more regular basis. So, you know, this is how you unleash that passion. This is how you develop those relationships, and this is how you build trust. And trust is always a two-way street. You know, you've got to build it. It's not going to happen naturally. So you've got to prove that you care about people, that you're sincere, you're authentic, and, you know, you're looking out for their interests as well as your own. Next slide.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
I'm sorry, since Edie led the way on interruption, I'm going to just do one little interruption. I think it's really important when we think about trust. I think a lot of us are like, oh, yeah, I developed this trusting relationship, which is great. And we do not want to be deficit-based here, but I think we need to be aware when we're kind of doing these self-inventories of our behavior to think about the times when we screw up. Because the little tiny screw-ups can erode all the amazing work we've been doing to build up trust. So we think like you just had a bad day, but a couple of bad days can just wipe away all the great work. So while we're thinking about all the things we should be doing, we also have to be keenly aware of the times when we haven't done so great, and then what does that mean in terms of rectifying the situation? So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, I think that's a good point. You know, I think, frankly, the best leaders are always willing to say, you know, I was wrong. I apologize. So, you know, again, as Naomi pointed out, you know, when you're not consistent and when you had bad days and you've had a bunch of bad days in a row, and then people begin to doubt you, you know, you have to be aware of that to be able to kind of bring it back and be honest and be real and say, I've had a couple of bad days. You know, if I was short or curt or not responsive, I really apologize. Let's see what I can do to help. So I think that's an important point. Okay, next slide. So, it's really all about building connections. Gallup calls it, having a best friend or a close friend at work. In other cases, to me, it's having a great sense of team. But it really is important because most of you, I'm sure, if you're a manager, you're leading teams of people, whether the teams are literally working as teams all the time, or whether they're coming together and pulling apart, doing individual work, coming together as a team to try to problem solve. So, it's really important that you not only foster relationships and connections with your individual employees, but you foster relationships and connections between the people who are on your team and making sure that they're working well together. That's a really important piece of building those connections because, the other thing too, and we spoke about this last time, you don't have all the answers. So, to connect people to other people that may have the answers where they feel comfortable going to others for expertise that you might not necessarily have is a great way to help people network and to build those connections within the organization and to engage people even more. Next slide. Teamwork, one of my favorite topics. I do a lot of work when I do my leadership training on creating and building successful teams. In fact, there's a great book out there called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. And frankly, one of the things he talks about as the foundation of successful teams is trust. One of the dysfunctions is a lack of trust. So creating successful teams, you really have to make sure that everybody is clear on the goals, having people be on the same page. Not everybody's going to have the same skill levels and strengths and skills, but you kind of blend the team together to make it work and play to people's strengths and use those skills to the team's advantage. And frankly, that's the way people learn from each other as well. Make sure that the participation is balanced. By that, I don't mean necessarily equal, but at least that everybody's participating. It's up to you to draw people who may be a little quiet or perhaps even disengaged in. Helping individual performance supports the team. The name of the book is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. It's a really easy read. It's read as it's written as a parable, as a story, and then he uses that to emphasize his different points. So anyway, creating successful teams, encouraging and establishing positive relationships among the team players, making sure, here's a key, making sure you hold people accountable. And frankly, the best teams hold each other accountable. That's another strong piece of Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions is when a team is not accountable to themselves and to each other, it tends to fall apart. And then it's really important. I do a lot of work when I talk about in my leadership groups. I talk about a lot about conflict resolution and how it's so important for managers and other leaders to really understand that conflict is inevitable, but you must address it. I know people frequently don't want to, but there are lots of tools and techniques that you can have in your toolbox to be able to pull out, to be able to resolve conflict, which is going to be inevitable. Next slide. Yes, unaddressed conflict. I kind of obliquely referred to it in the last slide, but unaddressed conflict, and I think Naomi said it really well, when there's stuff that doesn't go well, when there's stuff that screws up, when there's stuff that people feel frustrated about, when there's stuff that people have brought up that doesn't get addressed, people feel really frustrated. There is conflict, sometimes among and between people, and sometimes just conflict develops because of circumstances. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people, and there are a lot of people, unfortunately, that I've met, some people who are really good managers otherwise, that really become conflict averse. I have to say that one of the key things to being a successful leader and to making sure that all your employees are engaged is to be willing to address that conflict. It might, put a hurt in the pit of your stomach. It might make you feel queasy. It might make you feel uncomfortable, but we believe strongly, all three of us, in putting together this, that we had to put something in this presentation about unaddressed conflict, because leaving it alone, it doesn't just go away by itself. It's just like we talked about in the last presentation about dealing with your underperformers. They just generally don't change by themselves. You've got to be willing to be uncomfortable and to address it. So just like that, with any circumstance, whether it be a team or individuals who are kind of dragging the team down, or where there is conflict between and among people on your team, you've got to be willing to address it and resolve it. Next slide. So, to be engaging of employees, you have to be an engaging communicator. So here's just a couple of things, and we've talked several times throughout our sessions about how important being out there and communicating is. It's really critical. So we just, listed a couple of techniques and tools here for you. So, techniques, it's really important to listen. And when you are listening, to check for understanding. So feeding back in a way that to make sure that you're clear about what it is the other person is trying to say. Talking and writing, my gosh, it's so important. If I had another 5 sessions, I'd be able to do some work with emotional intelligence, which I think is a critical management skill. One of the things you need to do is to really be aware of how you're coming across. Think before you speak, because as a manager, your words have impact. The things you say can either hurt an employee for the day, or turn them off, or energize them. So you really have to think before you speak, because the things you say have impact. I can't tell you how many times I've heard about a manager saying something off the cuff, didn't even think about it, and it really bothered employees from that point on. So think before you speak. Make sure you're clear. Check for understanding. Do it regularly. Make sure people know what's going on. Be as transparent as you possibly can without giving away confidences, and strive to be simple when you're communicating. Don't complicate. Don't, give something that's a pretty good point and then get into lots of different subpoints that don't really matter that much. So strive for simplification, not complication. Next slide. So, this is all about, developing staff. As you saw from the Gallup slide, people love to learn and grow. It's one of the highest levels of engagement. So both the organization and individual managers have a tremendous opportunity to develop staff. In fact, frankly, what we've talked about in one of the previous seminars, which is actively managing people's performance, is a great way to develop staff. But, just having an organization that trains their managers, having opportunities to have stay interviews, to really get down, especially with some of your best people, and say, what's it going to take to have you stay? Looking for and searching out opportunities for growth, whether it's internally or externally, to help your staff grow. Connecting people with mentors who may have a different approach or a different level of experience than you do, and connecting people with those mentors to help them be better. Having a great career path within your organization. So if people don't necessarily want to move up the chain and become managers, are there other places for them to go where they've shown great skill and be able to move on to a higher level to keep their engagement? And then, it's really important, as I've said, both with conflict resolution and to make sure that employees have input, to really do collaborative problem solving, to work together to solve problems rather than the manager solving all the problems themselves. Next slide. Okay, just kind of down the home stretch, wrapping up here. Additional engagement strategies for managers: having honest and clear job descriptions. Don't list everything under the sun. You can put that in, other duties as required. But, to have them be honest, clear, talk about the things people actually going to be doing really is helpful. Realistic work preview and assessment. So, kind of pre-hire, make sure people know what they're getting themselves into. Extended onboarding once they come on, to make sure that people are completely enculturated, really clearly understand what your organization is about and what the expectations for them are. One of the things that we find falls apart for new hires is when they really don't have a good onboarding experience. They just come on, you give them a couple of days of orientation, and you just kick them out to try to figure it out themselves. That usually doesn't work. You have to provide guidance, and it's really important that you do provide that guidance as a great manager to engage your staff. Manage job performance and workloads. Is somebody overwhelmed? Is somebody underwhelmed and bored? You have to know what's going on so you can help people manage their workload. Hey, work-life balance, really critical, especially now. I think people are more focused on it. You have to make sure as a manager and as an organization that you are supportive of that, because burnt out people will not do anybody any good. And ultimately, hey, I know it's work and I know they call it work for a reason, but you got to have some fun during the workday. And if you can establish that environment where people are feeling good, having fun, enjoying their work, you're going to have much more engagement. And next slide. You'll know when you're doing well when you see these signs. Absenteeism and lateness are minimized. People really show enthusiasm and make a difference. People are actually sticking around, especially the ones you really want to stick around. You know, your feedback, either formally or informally, shows that people are really satisfied in the organization. And then ultimately, the whole reason for being engaged is to get people to feel excited, energized, fired up, excited, to make sure that your clients are experiencing great outcomes. So, you know, you do all the things we've talked about, you see these signs, you know you're moving in the right direction. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Naomi, and then we look forward to some Q&A.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Glenn. So I just want to mention a couple of supplemental resources that we're making available as part of this webinar. One of them is an organizational culture assessment called The World of Work. This, I think, is a fantastic tool. It's, I don't know, 20 questions or something. It's one of those kind of bipolar scales, but it has, for every measure, it would have like the dimension might be communication. We communicate on a need-to-know basis. We communicate frequently and transparently, and you figure out where you are in the middle between those two poles. And I think what it does is it gives you a lot of information about some of the different dimensions that you can be thinking about when assessing your own organizational culture and what you might find as points of strength or areas that need more development. There's no official scoring or anything to it. It's just a way to think through things. There's also a tip sheet called Strategies to Enhance Staff Retention. It kind of goes through in more detail some of the pieces that were talked about in here with more of a focus on the organizational level rather than on the managerial level. So some of the things like Glenn was talking just now about extended onboarding or realistic job previews, job sculpting, all those things are mentioned within that tip sheet, so check that out. Next slide. So coming up will be our final webinar on 2 weeks from today, When Values Align, Human Resource Tools to Help Your Organization Hire and Support Mission-Aligned Staff. It's a very lengthy title, but we'll be talking about a kind of toolkit that is currently through kind of going through the research process that includes a pre-employment screening tool, some interview questions, a performance measures tool, and some pieces in between. We will also be providing, we're in the process of writing up now, answers to all the questions that we've received throughout this series in writing, so that will be put up on the website as well. And if you go to the very lengthy link here, ctacny.org, workforce priorities, blah, 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 you can find everything in the series, including both the recordings of the webinars themselves, as well as all the supplemental resources. There's a whole bunch of great stuff, in my humble opinion, that are available there. So what I'd like to do now is to open it up. Oh, before I do, I just see the message coming to me. Remind people to take the survey that's chatted out at the end. I'm officially reminding you all to stick around for 2 seconds afterwards to take the survey that is posted at the end. Please do that. It'll be really helpful to all of us. So I want to start with a couple of the questions that came in during when Glenn was talking. So the first question that came in, which is kind of a statement, but it's also framed as it's also a question, is person is unengaged. They were furloughed for a while and they came back, not full time. Their supervisor was laid off during that period when they were not working. This individual plays very close to the vest and has said others plan on leaving. The person who posed the question or statement is a new CEO and is finding this person, as described, hard to reach and playing close to the vest. And I suspect the question is, how do I interpret this situation and what could I do about it? So I know Edie had one set of thoughts about it, and I want to ask Glenn if he has additional thoughts. I think all of us do. So Edie, you want to start?
Yeah, let me just, because I somehow wrote in an answer wrong in the wrong place. So give me a minute to just fix that. It's fun to chat when you do it right, not when you do it wrong. I think that it's a very good question. It's a very common situation. One of the things I wanted to say while one of Glenn's slides is up is that, most of us who are managers, even CEOs, we're just people. And we see ourselves as people, but other people see us as with much more power than we think we have. And when Glenn was saying, think before you talk, that is part of it. You have to realize often the power that comes with your title. So in this kind of situation, this person has been through the ringer. There's no doubt about that. But however they describe themselves or however other people describe them, I think that it behooves the manager to get to know that person themselves and figure out what's going on and to look at it from the typical strength-based way that we look at everything. Because something is going on, and for whatever they've been through, one wants to hear about it and let them speak and then move further into how they have to deal with it. So I think that's sort of what I was trying to say, but typing it was kind of hard.
Glenn, you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, engaging people is, both an art and a science. So, we tried to talk about both of those things today. I think it's really important to literally communicate with people and find out what it is that they're passionate about, find out what it is that they love, find out what it is that they don't like. And, in the case of unengaged or even disengaged, and, I've done a lot of work on employee engagement. There are actually employees who the literature calls actively disengaged. And those are the ones that are going to actually look to subvert some of the things that you're doing. But, I think it's important to root that out. And how do you root that out? You observe, you speak, you listen, you try to collaboratively problem solve to get at where the person is. And then you do all the things that you would normally do to try to engage employees, see what you can do to develop them, try to develop relationships with them, try to give them opportunities to learn and grow. And I think that will help, the unengaged employees. And then ultimately, look, we've talked about managing performance. And one of the things that we talked about and spent some considerable time on at the last webinar was, when it's not right, when the fit isn't right, you have to be willing to take steps to either move people up, make sure they're engaged, look at what you can do to help them develop, or figure out a way to move them out if they're just not, somebody that seems to be engaged and excited about being in your organization.
And I'm going to just add one little additional thought. I don't think anybody has the right to expect trust immediately. We have to earn people's trust. And earning 100%. Trust takes time, especially if we've been furloughed and felt like we've been screwed. So it just can take some time and little tiny baby steps. And I think we kind of put on our trauma-informed care hat and we think about all the different ways that we work on establishing trust with somebody who feels like they really don't trust.
I want to add one thing to that because that is so important. We have often, and we did this actually when we were planning the webinar, we often fall into as managers what the employee owes the organization. But I think it behooves us again to think about what we owe the employee. And that's really around not just engagement, but all the pieces we've talked about. And that is really what Naomi is saying. we owe the employee to be all the things that were presented, honest and forthright and knowledgeable, but to earn people's trust through that action.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go to the next question. I'm doing these sequentially, so just so you know, if we do not get to your question out loud here, we are hopefully within a week, we're going to have a published list of answers to everything, so there'll be a much more robust set of answers. The next question that came in was how, someone made a comment, I just want to share it, was how we address it when staff screw up in terms of our tone, screw up, I think that might have been my word, when staff performance desired, and how we talk to staff, communicate with staff around that in terms of tone and delivery has a big role in terms of maintaining trust and establishing safety for people, particularly when they feel like that safety might be not present. So I just wanted to make that comment that somebody shared. The next question was about how to be a good manager of building a team in this virtual world. Staff misses face-to-face meetings. Connecting is just not the same on Zoom. What can you do to establish that team spirit in this environment? Let me just start with Glenn.
Yeah, I can answer that because I've done some work on this. You know, and you really have to work a little bit harder because it is you don't really have the opportunities for face-to-face, meaning contact directly with you being next to somebody. But we have enough tools that people are pretty comfortable with now where, you can use some of those same tools to try to connect with people. I think that from a lot of the stuff that I've read recently about virtual teams, the regular check-ins are really important. In fact, even more so than when you're in a physical building with somebody, because people tend to walk down the hall and stop and chat and and catch up. The same isn't really possible when you're in a virtual world. So I think you have to make the effort to catch up, to connect with people individually. I think another thing is to make sure that we've talked about clear expectations. To make sure to remind people to get feedback from people. Let's make sure that we all are on the same page in terms of the goals, and even if there's different means to exercise what we normally do, we still have the same goals. Check in to see if people need help. And what I'm finding and reading a lot about this COVID-related world, people need a lot of help. So, if it's somebody to talk to, if it's a referral, if it's connecting with people who feel a similar way, if it's just caring about the employee and knowing that, their boss cares about them, I think you have to take the extra steps to do that.
Yeah, I think you're so right, Glenn, and it goes back to some of the other things that you said today. And, I don't really know how to say this except to spit it out, but if you're a manager, you really need to believe what you're saying, because people cut through the bull in a minute. And in COVID, it's even more so. When you get on, we're all so busy. It's not all about business. Sometimes it's about the connection. Sometimes it's about really caring that the other person is isolated, that you're looking at something, that they're alone, they're in a different spot. I'm looking at Glenn and I'm going, oh, you're outside, Glenn. You're trying to get some rays because it's a beautiful day. And these are the kinds of things that I think we have to reach out and do a little bit more. But we have to be honest, and we have to really feel what we're doing. We have to want to be there. And that's something for the manager. It's the dilemma for some managers who are thinking they don't want to manage anymore. That's a whole nother webinar.
Right. I think you described very well what I meant by authenticity. You really have to be yourself. You have to be willing to be out there. You're as a manager, you're a leader. So sometimes you have to kind of push yourself to do things that you might necessarily not find to be in your comfort zone, but are important to your employees. You've got to be selfless in that way.
Two additional kind of supplemental statements there. One is, I don't think anybody should assume that Zoom is face-to-face on the computer. You have to restructure how you're doing things. So if you're one of those people who like having very concise, clear meetings. They were like, they're standing meetings 15 minutes a day, switch to a half an hour where the first half of it is chit chat. Build in the pieces that you need to create a new structure. And then the other thing is ask everybody, what do they think they need to be more connected? People have all sorts of ideas. The more we can tap into that, the better. The next, I'm sorry, I'm trying to now be let's get everything done. The next question that somebody asked was and I think I'm understanding this correctly, team leaders may not be competent in all areas. Can you deputize team members to lead collaboratively?
Yeah, let me take that. The answer is absolutely yes. You have people that emerge from teams as leaders, even though they're not designated as the formal leader. So it may be either as a result of their particular set of skills, it may be as a result of their particular expertise. But yes, absolutely. I think one important thing is the acceptance of that person's skill or ability or expertise by the rest of the team to deputize them. But yes, there's no question that one of the ways that teams are successful is to have people play to their strengths and to have people be able to learn and grow from each other. And frankly, the best teams are those that hold each other accountable. So absolutely yes, deputizing people or frankly, even informally designating leaders within the team, or frankly, in other cases, leaders just emerge because of what they bring to the table to make the team more successful.
Yeah, if there could be anything positive about this crisis, and there always is something positive, a few positive things that come out of negative experiences. But in a number of leadership workshops that I've done over the past couple of months, it's come out that people have emerged as leaders that we wouldn't have thought were going to be leaders. I once heard Patricia Deegan, who's an incredible peer advocate, talk many, many years ago about someone who was considered what they then called low functioning. But in a particular situation, this man shone, and he was the person who led the group in moving forward in this situation. People respond to crises in different ways, and you never can underestimate someone's leadership ability. And a good manager, a good leader, will watch for that and encourage that person to move into that role and feel good about it. And one of the other questions that you'll get to, Naomi, is how do you do affirmations and how do you praise people in these days? And that's one of them. By realizing and sharing that someone has a skill that is coming forward is one of the ways that you can provide affirmation. And managers need to be alert to this, alert to seeing who's stepping up, and then encourage that stepping up.
I'm smiling because I've had a conversation with a friend who's a judge who had a law clerk who was just awkward, just bad until COVID hit. And now this woman has seen the team through. All of her skills are shining forth.
It's amazing.
Yeah. The next question is, what if you've tried all sorts of employee engagement strategies and you've not really gotten any results, in part because you've got an older workforce who's just waiting to get out?
So, I think that Glenn may have better ideas on this than I, but I would say, again, I always go to, my go-to is, don't blame the victim. My go-to is always, let's find out what's going on. Let's get to know the person. Let's see what it is that they can do between now and the time they retire. But on the other hand, I've been around long enough to know that there are some people who know they're going and they check out. And then the only thing you really can do with that situation is to be really clear about what needs to be done before checkout time and to hold people's feet to the fire to do that. And if you remember Glenn's point about help people move up or move out, maybe they need to move that retirement date up. But again, first, check out whether there's something you can do that's going to re-excite them until they move on. I don't know, Glenn, you got some better ideas than that? I bet you do.
Well, I don't want to disappoint you, Edie. I guess, one of the things, and I think Edie really said it perhaps in a little different way, but listen, I've dealt with those folks that seem to be just biding their time. And, there's a couple of things to do. One is, again, engage them, interact with them, find out what they're excited about, and maybe you can move them in that direction or give them more duties or responsibilities that will excite them. The other piece is, and I'm not usually a big fan of guilting people, but I found that if you say to them, look, a lot of the people here look up to you because you've been here for a while and you're experienced. You don't want to paint this picture of yourself. You want to be a good mentor and a good role model to these folks. You've had such a long and eventful career. Don't you want to be able to pass along that knowledge to others? And sometimes that'll spark them to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I do have something to pass along. I mean, I know for myself, I'm on the, we were talking earlier about golf before we got on here, and I'm a big golfer. And I must admit, I am on the back nine of my career. But one of the things, frankly, that's jazzed me in the last few years is developing people, making sure that I'm a role model, making sure that, I'm exciting people about being in HR or organizational development, that I'm providing mentorship for people. And if you can kind of tap into that for other people, that might be just enough to kind of keep them interested until maybe, you have to kind of move them up or move them out.
Yeah, someone just mentioned privately that when somebody checks out of their team, it's just unfair to the team.
Agreed.
And in some ways, if you begin to chat with the person around that and kind of begin to figure out how they can stay engaged after they go, because, I hate to be a clinician, but sometimes that disengagement is a protection. It's that they're leaving a job they love and they need to begin to separate from it. And so if you can work with a person about how to stay engaged to the end, or at least better engaged, it's a discussion. It's worth the discussion.
And I'm going to just follow up with a really quick comment. I don't know if anyone's watched Mozart in the Jungle. I just started watching it, and I was watching an episode.
Yeah.
Very good, Edie.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
I just saw an episode last night. So in this TV show, the orchestra from the old conductor, its orchestra, is kind of disengaged. They're checked out. They're not doing well. And the new conductor, who's flamboyantly fascinating, puts them all, says, bring a sweater, we're going on a field trip, and then he takes them up to what looks like the South Bronx into an empty lot, and they play the 1812 Overture, and it kind of rekindles their joy. And if you take that idea of maybe people have lost their spark because they're so burnt out, maybe you need to help them find what got them into the field in the first place, a little like what a marriage counselor does.
Great idea. Why
did you fall in love in the first place? So you may want to check out Mozart in the Jungle Season 1, episode whatever, the rehearsal, just as an FYI.
I got it on my list for tonight.
All right. Watch the whole series. Anyway.
Thank goodness for Netflix.
Gotcha. Amazon Prime.
Good to know. Okay.
It's 12:03, so I don't want to keep people. There are some other really good questions in here. I'm just going to read just a few so you know what's coming. Handling conflict with others when the person won't accept their role in the conflict or doesn't want the conflict to end. Ways of providing affirmations versus praise. Developing a good onboarding process if it's an issue. Staff who are leaving the organization or the field because of COVID and just moving out to Montana. Promoting trust in a culture ruled by micromanaging staff. I think those are pretty much it. And I just want to also mention one other point that somebody mentioned to the comment before about, to this comment about engagement strategies and what you've tried. And what Robert Benjamin commented, which I thought was a very good point, was maybe it's possible that your organization is showing through other ways that they are not standing behind the engagement strategy. So there's some mixed messaging going on. So just another piece to continue to consider. I'm going to stop there. Again, we're going to be sending out a survey. If you stay on for a couple seconds just to take the survey, that would be really helpful. And we hope that you will be able to join us next time for our final presentation. And again, please look at all the resources. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And we hope to see you soon. And we'll be having the FAQs.
Bye, everyone. Bye, guys.
Bye.